It's a cold January night on the Korean border, and U.S. Sergeant Charles Jenkins is desperate to escape his post. Wandering into the secretive North, he begins an ordeal that will transform his life. But in amongst the beatings and the humiliation, he meets a woman who will change everything. Jenkins was born February 18, 1940 in Rich Square, a town in North Carolina. By the time he was a young man, the United States was deeply embroiled in the Vietnam War, and like many of his contemporaries, Jenkins signed up to fight with the U.S. Army. Jenkins managed to avoid being sent to the front lines in Vietnam, however. Instead, he was stationed in South Korea and tasked with watching the border with the Communist North. And even though his post was a completely safe one, he still fretted over what the future might hold. One night in January 1965, when Jenkins was 24 years old, those fears finally came to a head. Terrified that he would get shot while on duty or be reassigned to fight in Vietnam, he turned to the bottle. Then, drunk and full of despair, he decided to make a break for it. As a U.S. soldier, Jenkins knew the dangers of his plan all too well. If caught by his own side, he could face spending the rest of his life behind bars. Nonetheless, he planned to travel through North Korea into Russia, where he would attempt to claim political asylum. Ironically, it was a decision that would result in imprisonment of a different kind. I did not understand that the country I was seeking temporary refuge in was literally a giant demented prison, he later wrote in Reluctant Communist, his 2009 biography. Once someone goes there, they almost never get out. In fact, Jenkins' decision to cross into North Korea was the start of an ordeal that would last the next 40 years. Immediately taken captive, he was kept in a single room along with 3 other American deserters: Larry Abshire, James Dresnick, and Jerry Parrish. There, the 4 men were forced to live a simple life without access to electricity or heating. They were also made to feature in North Korean propaganda aimed at American troops. Back at Jenkins' camp, meanwhile, his fellow soldiers began receiving pamphlets depicting their former comrade living a luxurious, wealthy existence. At the same time, Jenkins and the other defectors were subjected to 10-hour-long lessons in the teachings of Kim Il-sung, who at the time was the leader of North Korea. Then, eventually, after 7 years of captivity, the men were allowed to live in their own homes. Despite their new freedom, however, Jenkins and the others were still subjected to round-the-clock surveillance, as well as regular torture sessions and beatings. For work, they were forced to teach English, although Jenkins lost the job owing to his pronounced Carolina accent. On top of that, the men were ordered to appear in Kim Jong-il's propaganda movies. The son of the North Korean leader, Kim Jong-il, was obsessed with filmmaking and sought to gain his father's praise through his elaborate creations. And so, cast as evil Americans, the defectors soon found themselves stars on North Korea's silver screen. Then in 1980, another set of orders came from above. Apparently, Jenkins was to marry, and his bride had already been chosen for him. Just 21 years to his 40, Hitomi Soga was foreign as well, a nurse from Sado Island off the western coast of Japan. 2 years previously, Soga had been kidnapped by agents in her homeland and brought to North Korea against her will. Once there, she was tasked with teaching Japan's language and traditions to aspiring spies. And as a young and beautiful woman, she was a welcome sight to Jenkins, who'd been alone in the country for 15 years. Against all odds, Jenkins and Soga fell in love, and in time Soga gave birth to 2 daughters, Mika and Brenda. As the girls grew up, Jenkins began to suspect that they were being groomed as spies, and that the North Korean government planned to use their Western appearance to its advantage. Then in 2002, everything changed. By this time, Kim Jong-il had taken over from his father as the leader of North Korea. And in an official announcement, he admitted that the country had been responsible for the kidnap of 13 Japanese citizens over the years. What's more, by way of apology, the 5 survivors were to be sent home, although only for a short visit of 10 days. While Soga was chosen to be among the visitors, she had to leave her husband and daughters behind. And when the survivors decided to remain in Japan, the family were torn apart. Because Jenkins was a deserter, he faced extradition and life in prison if he attempted to follow his wife. Eventually, Jenkins was so desperate to reunite his family that he decided the trip was worth the risk. First, he gained permission to take his daughters on a short trip to Indonesia. There, he then met Soga, and the family fled together to safety in Japan. On September 11, 2004, Jenkins arrived at a U.S. base near Tokyo, Japan. Dressed in a smart suit, he approached a military officer. "Sir, I'm Sergeant Jenkins, and I'm reporting," he's said to have announced. In total, he'd been AWOL for almost 40 years, the longest desertion that America has ever seen. After pleading guilty to desertion, Jenkins was sentenced to 30 days in prison, although he served just 25. Finally free then, the family moved to Sado Island, where Jenkins took a job selling crackers in a tourist park. By now a local celebrity, he was often asked to pose for photographs by visitors who had seen him on TV. On December 11, 2017, Jenkins passed away, having remained a free man until his dying day. And although he lived in constant fear of kidnappers, he was proud that he'd finally managed to help his family escape. Still, were it not for his arranged marriage, he might never have made it out of North Korea at all.